let's talk a little bit about the Alter Rebbe, his personality, and sing some songs. And then I also brought a mimer just in case we're up to it. All right. First of all, the Alter Rebbe is known as the first Rabbi of Chabad. And he was remarkable in every sense. The Rebbe once gave a sikha and pointed out that the Alter Rebbe did everything not only cerebrally, whatever, not only like intellectually, but he actually did everything to work it out. For example, he said, like the Alter Rebbe talks about certain measurements, about how big, how large the tefillin, how big should the kiddush cup be, how much matzah do you have to eat. So he said that Alter Rebbe actually did the experiments. He didn't just rely on what someone else did, but he actually did the experiments himself. Also, many rabbis do not read the Torah in public, either because they don't know or because they're a little bit flying in Shemayim, and to read each letter perfectly when their mind is furiously working, it would be almost very hard for them. But the Alter Rebbe read the Torah. The Alter Rebbe blew the shofar. In other words, the Rebbe spoke about how the Alter Rebbe, this great mystic and this great Kabbalist, was actually also the type of a hands-on Rebbe, a hands-on person. And we could see that in his holy writings, especially in the Tanya. You would think, how does the Alter Rebbe know my struggle? One of the biggest things about social work is to be and to feel empathy and to understand where that person is coming from. So if you're going to a therapist or a social worker or psychiatrist or psychologist or any of the other professionals, but they have no idea of what you're talking about, they can't understand your struggles, they could give very little counsel, and they certainly can't elevate you because they're from two different worlds. In other words, if someone from Nigeria would come and explain to me, the troubles he has in his village, chances are I wouldn't be able to really relate to that. I don't know what it is. I'm not sure of poverty. I don't know what ignorance is, and so on. The fact that the Alter Rebbe could deal with the nitty-gritties like bad thoughts, inclinations, stuff like that, he seems to know us very well, really very well. And it's pretty interesting how an individual who's so far removed from all of that is able to not only understand us, but actually relate to us and give us counsel on how to get out of it. And this quote-unquote trick can only be from a Rebbe. Because what a Rebbe is a neshama klalis. A Rebbe is a soul that's all-inclusive.
Did he write a Sefer Torah?
The Alter Rebbe himself, we don't. I don't know if it's related that he wrote a Sefer Torah, but that he was a scribe, he certainly was. We know that the fourth Rebbe of Chabad wrote mezuzahs, he wrote Megillah, so he actually was. Marash actually was a scribe that he did. Okay.
That's impressive.
What I want to point out is that actually the Alter Rebbe said before he passed away, he made the following statement. He said, "Devas wird halten bei mein Klaminke." And now I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Klaminke, I think, is a Russian word or a Yiddish word. I think it's a Russian word, but it means doorknob. And this is what he said: "Whoever will hold on to my doorknob, I will do him a favor in this world and in the world to come." And that statement of the Alter Rebbe that he said shortly before leaving us has been given many, many interpretations. And his grandson, the Tzemach Tzedek himself, I think gave 14 interpretations of what it might mean. But the conventional wisdom, I'm not sure if this is one of the 14 or this is just from the Mashpiyim, those that teach Chassidus, but they point out that, there's a house. In order to enjoy a good meal, you have to be in the house. If you want to hear nice music, and the door is closed, you have to be in the house. And then there's the desire to enter the house. And that desire to enter the house is simply, symbolized by holding on to the doorknob. So the Alter Rebbe said, if a person is holding on to the doorknob of where I live or what I teach, I promise that I will do him a favor in this world and in the world to come. And that's very, so to speak, very reassuring. That there are many levels of being a chassid, many levels of being dedicated to the Alter Rebbe. But the fact that you just hold on to the doorknob, and incidentally, if you actually look till today in 770, some people go, I don't know if you ever noticed, maybe you delayed notices, whatever, but there are some guests that actually come upstairs and they just touch the doorknob of the Gan Eden Atachton. There's a door. When you open up the door, that would be the Rebbe's hallway, and then you would go into the Rebbe's room. It's usually closed. It's only open at certain times. A lot of people
kiss the door. They kiss the door.
Oh, they kiss the door. But I know that many people hold on to the doorknob, because the Alter Rebbe said, whoever holds on to the doorknob, I'll be able to think about him and to relate to him. But again, you're not in the door. But it symbolizes a desire to get closer. So for the Alter Rebbe, in his goodness and good-naturedness of ahava, of loving a fellow Jew and of loving Hasidim, he said, as long as you're just trying, and you just bought the Tanya, you didn't open it up, it's still in its wrapping, you know what I mean? But you bought the Tanya, that means you would like to study the Tanya, and if you like to study the Tanya, that means you would like to change. If you like to change, you will change. Already, you bought the Tanya, that's already holding on to the doorknob. And that the Alter Rebbe should say that is very, very special, because to one's chassid who was dedicated to him, the Alter Rebbe was upset that he's relying on his closeness. So the Alter Rebbe looked at him and he said, again, I'm adding words, so I don't know the exact words, but the Alter Rebbe said something to this effect. He says, you're coasting on me. You know what I mean? You're expecting to go to heaven based on that you were my chassid. He said, you should know that not only will you not know where I am in heaven, but you won't even know the highway to go on. You're going to be totally lost. So if you say, look, go on the 5, and 300 miles later you'll be in LA. It's quite a distance, but at least you know the highway. He says, but you won't even know the highway where I am. And yet, to the average chassid, to the average chassid, he said, halten by the klaminke. Whoever holds on to the doorknob will be assured that I will take care of him. And of course, everyone in this room probably has learned a little bit of the Tanya, and we are in San Francisco, which is a very far place from the holiness of Jerusalem, and it doesn't really make a difference about how little we understand. The fact that we get together and we study a book of a tzaddik who promises in this book that this is the way to serve Hashem, it's certainly, at the very least, holding on to the knob, but it's probably much more than that. Now, on the Yahrtzeit, it's an amazing time, because we're taught in our tradition that on the Yahrtzeit, the neshama, time is eternal, basically, and it's in a sense, cylindrical. P.S. You've heard this before, but I'll repeat it just to remind you. If you look at time as a timeline, you often see that, on the left, year 2000, you know what I mean, and then you get closer, year 3000, 4000, 5000, or in science, before creation, during creation, when man was a fish, man was a monkey, and then man becomes it's a timeline. So you have the distant past, and you have the present and the future, and of course the past, the present from the past could be eons, hundreds of millions of years. But we never look at time like that. Because according to that, we left Egypt some, 3,800 years ago or something to that effect. And that would make going out of Egypt today as a celebration very stale. It's like, what are we trying to remember? What, something that happened thousands and thousands of years ago? Or God willing, it'll come Purim. We just celebrated Hanukkah, Yud Shvat. Today is Chavdal Tevis. It's not that it happened, the event, the Alter Rebbe passed away in the year 1813. So what is that? How many years? A little bit more than 18, 19, 20, right? So a little bit more than 200 years ago. By this time, what's there to talk about? 200 years is a long time. No. Time is not a timeline. Time is a cycle. So it's almost as if to say time is going around and it repeats itself. So if you look at a spiral, right? If you have, for example, a light shining upwards, every single time the orbit passes the light, it's going to get the full intensity. It doesn't make a difference if it's on the bottom or if it's on the top. Essentially, it's going to get the light. Especially if we believe that the light gets stronger. So from year to year, the light will reach a higher level, but at the same time and the same place. So every neshama, when it comes the anniversary of its departure from this world, which loosely we'll call death, when it dies, it leaves the body, it goes up to heaven, it gives an accounting of its life, and then there's the purification and the reward. The following year and the year after that, it's not like the neshama doesn't relive the experience. It's not like the neshama forgot. The neshama retains all of the equivalent of what it accomplished spiritually on earth. In fact, you might know this, Gan Eden is not a reward that Hashem gives you. Gan Eden can be seen as a reward of what you accomplished. In other words, we all do Torah, we all do mitzvahs. But the issue is we don't appreciate of what we're doing. We don't really enjoy it. We often question, like, so what did I just do? So I put up a mezuzah, so what? And it's ongoing. It's 24/7. You put up a mezuzah when you moved into the house. It's 32 years later that you check the mezuzah once a year or twice in 7 years. And so what? You forget about it. No. That mezuzah has an ongoing effect on the house and on your neshama. And in the general picture of protection for Klal Yisrael. So when the neshama goes up after 120 years, it retains all of that. On the day of the Yahrtzeit, what happens is there's no more sin. It's been already atoned for. So what is eternal? Goodness is eternal. Evil is transitory. So the evil is over. It decayed. The goodness becomes clearer and stronger. And therefore, every year, for all of us, no matter which level we're holding, the Yahrtzeit is not only a day of remembrance for us, but it's a day that the neshama is remembered in heaven, and consequently further given a reward or further elevated so it can appreciate even deeper the godliness that it created. Now this is true about every Jew, a man or woman. When we talk about a tzaddik, we're talking about a different ballgame. We're talking about a tzaddik who embodies godliness on earth. Everything about his life is godly, and the lights that he created, the holiness that he created, is ongoing. So all of us are Hasidim of the Alter Rebbe. We're also Hasidim of the Middle Rebbe. Certainly we're Hasidim of our Rebbe. It's not one long chain, but really one circle. It's just all the Rebbes are found in our Rebbe. In fact, in the very, very, very early years of the Rebbe's Nesius, 1952, like 2 years after he took it, the Rebbe once spoke, I forget which Farbrengen it was, but he was very harsh on himself. Yeah, he said words that we don't even like to repeat. He said something like, who am I, and why am I the Rebbe? You know, I don't know. He was, and he said something about, no, I'm the seventh of the Alter Rebbe, but it's the Alter Rebbe. So Rabbi Mordechai Mentlik, who was the Rosh Hashiva, couldn't hear it. He jumped up and he ran to the Rebbe. He said, Rebbe, give me a l'chaim. So he said, you want a l'chaim from me? I want a l'chaim from the Alter Rebbe. That's what I want. You are the Alter Rebbe. What are you saying? You're not the Alter. You are the first Rebbe of Chabad. You are the second Rebbe of Chabad. You're a composite of all of the Rebbes of Chabad. But all of this is ongoing, and it's all real. When it comes Chav Dalet Teves, which is the Yahrtzeit of the Alter Rebbe, not only is his neshama elevated and reaffirmed, and he gets a yasher koyach from all of the great neshamas that you did job well done, but each and every one of us is actually connected to him. And with his aliyah, the word aliyah means elevation, all of us are elevated as well. So what we got to do is drink a little chaim, sing some songs, and then get into this a little bit. L'chaim, everybody. L'chaim l'bracha. As you know, the Alter Rebbe was the author of 10 Negudim. We'll try to sing some of his Negudim tonight. We'll start with one everyone knows. It's a famous one. Keili Yaakov v'yodeko. Drink it, it'll sound better. Opens up the vocal cords. Keili Yaakov v'yodeko. Like Ayadoi memeko. Keili Yaakov v'yodeko. know, the Alter Rebbe, the first of the seven Rabbeim, essentially started the Tshuva movement. I need someone to remind me. Just remind me to say that in case I get off the subject. Bring me back. You know, today, you go to, I know most people today don't read, but in the olden times when a person would go to like a Barnes and Nobles or whatever it is, you go to like a self-help section or self-improvement section, hundreds of books that tell you how to be a great person, how to get ahead, how to make $1 million, how to get the girl you want, whatever you want. There's a magic formula. Well, I didn't read thousands of them. In fact, I don't even know if I read 10 of them. But what I understand from the reviews and from what I hear, many of them have the same theme, and that is you got to believe in yourself. And you have to forgive yourself. And you have to understand that you're really a terrific, tremendous, unlimited potential guy. And it's a shame that no one else understands it. So this book is simply not to educate you. It's to educate others to appreciate you. Now, no, that's really when you hear the undercurrent of it. And this book will tell you how to sell yourself. So essentially, it starts off backwards, which is, you're already a success story. The problem is, you're frustrated, no one appreciates it. I'll help you get that acknowledgement. To say lahavdil would be an understatement, but the contrast between white and black, you know, truth and falsehood. You open up some of the svarim that we read. First, many years ago, there lived a great rabbi. I think he was in Salonika. It could be I'm a little mixed up, but I know the name of the book that he wrote. It's called Rebbe Yahrtzeit. Anyway, this is a book that's filled with Musar. But it's not negative. I shouldn't say not negative. I mean, it's Musar. It encourages you to do what's right. So they say that there was, someone once saw one of the great tzaddikim, and he was actually sitting in his room, and the chassid came in, or maybe it wasn't the chassid, maybe it was a student, came in, and he saw this very great man, and he was very pensive, very like inward. And he could notice that there was tears in his eyes. He said, Rebbe, is everything okay? He said, yes. He said, but you look very down. And I see tears. You're clearly upset about something. He said, oh yeah, I'm very, very upset. He said, why are you upset? He said, you know, someone just called me all kinds of names. He called me wicked, arrogant, stupid, yeah, and it hurt. So he wants to know who it is so he can roll up his sleeves and beat him up. He says, and what was the Rebbe's response? The Rebbe's response, he said, I hugged him and I kissed him. So he says, I'm missing. I don't understand. First you tell me you're upset that they called you names and you hugged him and kissed him. And he said, yes, and he took out a book. He said, I was reading the book, I think it was Rebbe Yahrtzeit, and in this holy book, he tells you, why aren't you davening, why aren't you learning, why aren't you this? He calls you names, you're a sluggard, you're just pampering yourself. But he was so right. So I kissed him. I mean, this amazing thing. Would you buy the book that tells you that the reason why you're not ahead is because you're simply lazy, you're stupid, you're self-centered, you're egocentric, you have no charm. No one would buy such a book. You'd buy it for your best enemy. You send it with love, read it from cover to cover. You understand? Yeah. But you wouldn't buy such a book. And then we open up our holy svarim, written by people who loved God and loved their fellow Jews. And they mince no words. How come you're not a tzaddik? At the very least, why are you not a Beinoni? Why aren't you not davening? What is it? Can't control yourself? What are you talking about? The mind can control the heart. I can't do it. I wasn't born. My parents didn't have holy thoughts. What do they have to do? Your neshama comes straight from Hashem. On and on and on. The sefer doesn't hit you, but it really opens up your life. But the next word I'm going to say is really a little bit off color, so you don't have to listen to it. But basically, where would I put a book like the Tanya in a bookstore? Would it be under self-improvement? Would it be under spirituality? Would it be under mysticism? Would it be Kabbalist? Would it be New Age? You're probably a guy who still goes to bookstores. I mean, right? So under which category would it go?
All of the categories.
All of the categories. I'll tell you where I would think it might go. And I don't mean it seriously, I mean it metaphorically. It would go in the intersection under toilet training.
What?
Because you see, because there's a little kid who's as sweet as sugar. Really, I mean, it's adorable. Especially if they're a bath with Johnson's baby powder. Oh, you could mamish eat up this kid. When this little kid, though, has a full diaper, suddenly it's like, Rabbi, I think your kid needs to be changed. Why should I change my kid? I liked my kid. No, you know, the diaper. The diaper. Well, the rabbi looks, Rebbetzin, your child needs to be changed. Now, they're talking about this little kid who's still as charming as it comes. He's still smiling. The only one that's not embarrassed, the only one that doesn't feel that he's walking around with a bad smell is who? The kid. He's actually touching the stuff. He's actually carrying the stuff. He doesn't feel anything. It's the people around him. You know, I tell you, when you learn Hasidus, I told you it's a little off color. It's okay. You know, you don't have to really remember this at all.
By the way.
But you know, when you learn Hasidus, there are. It's like you smell. With all due respect, you're the most charming kid. Really charming. You know, you're sweet. You're cute. You're a darling. Everyone wants to hold you. Everyone wants to kiss you. But they don't want you to have a dirty diaper. So, if you're filled with ego, that's a dirty diaper. If you're filled with, anger, that's a dirty diaper. If you're filled with smugness, that's a dirty diaper. And then there's, of course, the regular sins that we're very comfortable with, like not doing this and not davening and not learning and not. That's a dirty diaper. Who's going to tell you about this? What happens is in polite company, they don't say that you have body odor. They just keep a distance. It takes a tzaddik. It takes a really holy person who really, really cares about the baby because he knows how beautiful that baby is. Really, the sweetest thing on earth is a baby, a toddler. People, lahavdil, to make a separation. Isn't that a cute little dog? You ever hear that? Such a cute dog, a little puppy walking. There's nothing cuter, sweeter, more desirable than a little kid. But they can't have that dirty diaper. So when we learn Chassidus in general, and especially when you learn the Tanya, which is really the nitty-gritty, it's the real essence of who is a person. Two neshamas, two souls, two kings, they're fighting for control. You are in control if you wish it, and so on. This is reminding you of what you have to get rid of. And interesting enough, in the case of a baby, someone can do it for you. In the case of the Holy Tanya, he empowers us. Each and every one of us can make themselves into something adorable in the eyes of God and in the eyes of man. It's amazing that the Alter Rebbe, who's this holy leader of Klal Yisrael, I mentioned before, like he started the Baal Tshuva movement. What do I mean by that? So this is what I'm telling you is a story that the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote. I'm going to condense it, but it's very famous, and the Rebbe spoke about it many times at the Farbrengen. The story goes that there was the Alter Rebbe, his name was? Shneur Zalman, very good. And his older son, his name was Reb Dov Ber, and he took over from his father. It's called the Middle Rebbe, the Middle Rebbe. So Reb Dov Ber was obviously a fervent follower of his father and of his father's teachings. In general, they had very different personalities, which I don't want to talk about now. but very, very different personalities. Though, of course, they share the same neshama in terms of bringing godliness and making godliness manifest. So, the Dov Ber, he would pray for many, many hours, just like his father. In general, though, when he davened without too much movement of the body and with an inner joy. But there were certain times when he was very verbittered, very, very bitter, when he davened with a deep sense of bitterness of who he was. And here's the story. One time, the Mittel Rebbe came to his father and he was very distressed, very, very distressed. He said, Rebbe, my father, I had a terrible dream. I don't know if you used the word terrible, though, an awesome dream. What was the dream? He said, I dreamt that I saw a river. And I was looking at the banks of the river, right? You know the story. I looked at the banks of the river, and I saw I saw three people, someone in the middle, a taller one to his left, and you to his right. And I was looking at the river, and I heard the shorter one, who was in the middle, tell the taller one that was to his left, go on the river. And there was like a board. And what happened is the tall fellow went on, it was almost like a surfboard, you know. He went on the board. And suddenly, as he went on the board, the river became very stormy. He didn't fall off, but he was on the board and it was going up and down, up and down, up and down. And he got there around halfway through the river when the one in the middle said, come back. He came back. Then he said, I saw again you, the one in the middle and the taller one, walk to another part of the river. And this part of the river was very interesting. It was stormy, but when the waves broke on the shore, it turned into beautiful colors and things began to grow. And the one in the middle said to my father, the Alter Rebbe, go on the board. And the Alter Rebbe went on the board, and though the waves were going up and down, he wasn't shaking. And by the time he came past the half, he was almost on the other side, the other one called him back, the middle one called him back and said, come back. With your potential, you could go not only through waves of water, but even waves of fire. And I woke up. The Alter Rebbe listened, and he said, daven. After davening, come back to me. And that's when the Mittel Rebbe davened, but with a deep sense of bitterness. He was just very, very upset about this whole thing. He didn't know exactly what it meant. Interesting enough, when the Rebbe gave over the Sikha, I was there, the Rebbe sort of said with like a half smile, what's so scary about it? You know, it was like, but somehow the Mittel Rebbe was profoundly moved by this. When he came back to his father said like this, the one that was in the middle was the Holy Baal Shem Tov. The one that was to his left was the Maggid of Mezrich, his primary student. And I was on the other side of the Baal Shem Tov because I'm a student of the Baal Shem Tov and of the Maggid. And what you saw, that river of waves, the Maggid went on it. That's the river of fiery study of Torah, or something to that effect. But when we went to the next part, the waves that were going up and down were the tears of a Baal Teshuvah. And because I made it primary in my life to make people Baalei Teshuvah, what a Baal Teshuvah means, to bring them back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So I was able to go over all of those waves. Not only that, but when the waves hit the ground, they gave forth beautiful colors and made things grow, because the Baal Teshuvahs that I made other Baal Teshuvahs as well. So the Alter Rebbe basically said that there's an Avodah, the Maggid of Mezrich, his Avodah was to make great students. I mean, if the Alter Rebbe was his youngest student, you could understand his students. Rabbi Yahrtzeit Farbrengen, Rabbi Melech of Lezhensk. I mean, all of these stars, that are bright. But the Alter Rebbe, in addition to his own personal students, he had two Chadorim, a Cheder Aleph, Cheder Beis, and then a Cheder Gimel later on. What he wanted was, his message was for people like me and you. No holy rollers over here. We're talking about Baalei Teshuvah. To help a person return to Hashem. What's not only is that the essence of what the Alter Rebbe was planning to do, and he actually did, but as the interpretation of the story went, when the waves fell down, it turned into beautiful colors and things began to grow. Probably everyone in this room could probably see themselves as not only a wave, of holiness, but where you land, you've already had an effect on others, making other people grow and encouraging them in their Yiddishkeit. So I mentioned two things from the Alter Rebbe. Number one, even if you're just holding on to the doorknob, we're connected to him. And we're connected to Chassidus, and we're connected to, essentially, Mashiach. Why? Because, as many of us were taught, when the Holy Baal Shem Tov had an ascension of his soul. This happened on Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah, after Shul, where do we go? Upstairs to eat honey cake, and to relax. So there's so much praying, 2 hours, Mincha, Tashlich, we're already overwhelmed. The Baal Shem Tov, after his prayers on Rosh Hashanah, he went for a walk in heaven. Just to get a little bit out of the stuffiness of the shul. And as he's walking in heaven, he goes from Heichel to Heichel, from palace to palace to palace, and there was tremendous joy. And he says in his famous letter, I don't know why they were so happy. Maybe it was because I died. And they were coming to welcome me, but I didn't die. He said, till today, I don't know why they were so happy. But he says, I went from Heichel to Heichel until finally I came to the palace of the Mashiach. And I said, Master, when are you going to come? And he answered me, when the teachings that you teach will spread outwards, and people will be able to do what you're able to do. And he said, with that I woke up. Now there's a Hasidic commentary. When the Baal Shem Tov heard that, 2 tears fell from his eyes. Why? Because he was thinking, when will that time come? That people could do what he's doing. So he was thinking of the time. Reb Baruch of Mezhebush, as you might know, was the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. He was the foremost opponent in the Hasidic world of the Alter Rebbe. And as a matter of fact, when the Alter Rebbe came back from his imprisonment, which is the famous 19th of Kislev story, he wrote 2 letters, one to Rebbe Yahrtzeit Farbrengen, and one to Reb Baruch of Mezhebush, to the grandson. One of the things that he mentioned to Reb Baruch, he says, I was in prison because of your grandfather. When they I could have said, why are you arresting me? Arrest the grandson. But I took it upon myself, so this is the way you paid me back. But they had a tremendous respect and disagreement between one another. Chassidim couldn't understand this from both sides. Such 2 holy tzaddikim, one a physical grandchild, one a spiritual grandchild, both of them. Anyway, the Alter Rebbe himself once said that the disagreement between me and the tzaddik Reb Baruch is the same disagreement between King David and King Saul. The first king of Israel, the second king of Israel. It's not something that Hasidim understood, but on earth he spoke things against the Alter Rebbe. He actually was hurting him, so to speak. So Hasidim in the commentary is that the reason why Reb Baruch was so upset with the Alter Rebbe was because the Alter Rebbe was teaching the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, and he wanted everyone to become like a little Baal Shem Tov. And Reb Baruch who was the physical grandson of his Zayda, Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, said, "You made him cry." So Rabbi Baruch was upset about the 2 tears that came from the Baal Shem Tov, but the Alter Rebbe said, even so, we have a mandate, and that is, when will the Mashiach come? When Kshiyafutza Meinesecha Chutza. Now, it's a little bit of a mishmash what I'm telling you, but with a couple of chaims, it all makes sense. I said that the Alter Rebbe said before he passed away, right? Hold on to my, which means you're not a tzaddik, but you would like to be a Baal Tshuva, right? And I also told you the story, which is well known about between him and the Mittler Rebbe. Actually, can a tzaddik do tshuva? In other words, he has nothing to repent upon. He's so close to Hashem. Is it possible for him, A, to do a type of teshuvah, and B, if he is possible to do teshuvah, how can he do it?
He can still turn closer and he can repent for other people.
Not bad. Pretty good. So actually, going closer is really an interesting statement. It's hard to really put it in terms, because today he did the best he could. Tomorrow he'll do the best he could. Why tomorrow does he have to repent on what he did the best he could today? It's not like Tuesday was missing. It's just Wednesday he becomes greater. So now he does tshuva that on Tuesday I wasn't as great as I. I mean, there is something to that, but it's a little bit hard to put into it. So the Rebbe is machadish a great chiddush, and in the Devar Malchus of this week, I read a sikha from Tavshin Chavtes, another chiddush. They come together magnificently. The Rebbe is machadish in the 10th volume of Likutei Sichos Pashas Vayechi. He writes like this: there is a Baal Teshuvah, someone who has to do tshuva himself, and then there's someone who helps someone else do tshuva. Not, when I say help, doesn't only give out the instructions, basically walks with him to help him do tshuva. When you help someone do teshuva, you get the reward, and you are participating in tshuva. So how can a tzaddik gomer, a completely righteous person who has never sinned in his life and never will sin in his life, how can he do tshuva? The answer is by not only teaching us, but that makes a distance between the teacher and the student, but teaching and then walking, participating, going with the student to do tshuva. So now he's a tzaddik who is a Baal Teshuvah. Interesting enough, what does the word Baal mean? Master. He is the master of return because he's able to help other people return, which is a tremendous chiddush, because we say, there's the Baal Teshuvah, but there's the tzaddik. The tzaddik. The greatness of the tzaddik is that he's also a Baal Teshuvah. And in that sense, if you want to say it with a touch of irony, some Baalei Teshuvah get insulted. Don't call me a Baal Teshuvah. I already repented. Which is an interesting thing, by the way. This is something I've spoken about many times to the people that are close to me. The word Baal Tshuva is really, should not be used in general, and in particular, especially if you're already part of it. Because it says clearly, you're not allowed to embarrass a person to remind them of his misdeeds. Mm-hmm. That's a halacha. You're not allowed to, can't say, I remember you when you ate treif. I remember seeing you at McDonald's. You're not allowed to do that. He used to eat at McDonald's. He doesn't eat at McDonald's anymore. He's actually healthier for that, and he's more holy for that. And now he gives hashgacha on the restaurant. Okay, so when you say, he's a Baal Teshuvah, what are you doing? You're actually reminding this person of his sins. But you have no right to remind him of his sins. Hashem has already forgiven him when he did teshuvah. And if you tell someone else, when I'm in the time of shidduchim, trying to marry off kids, and someone said, he's a Baal Teshuvah family. what does that mean about Teshuvah family? Well, his father became religious with Chabad 62 years ago, or 50 years ago. So that's about Teshuvah family. Why are you calling it about Teshuvah family? They're not newcomers. They have all of their children in Beis Rivka in Chabad yeshivas. 3 of them are shluchim. The other 2 will give $1 gazillion to charity. What do you mean about Teshuvah? Actually, today is my father's Yahrtzeit. It's over, but I learned a lot from him. I don't want to get too personal, but the truth of the matter is I never really appreciated him as a chassid. I always saw him as the rabbi. But actually he was quite a big chassid, and it's just that he didn't wear the costume. But anyway, he said many times, he was the rabbi of the Syrian community. When he took over, he was rabbi for them over almost 50 years. I'll tell you a little bit. Just by the way, the last couple of years, maybe 3 or 4 years of my father's life, he was in an assisted facility, and he was only a shadow of what he used to be. When did he wake up? Whenever the people from the community came to visit him, I mean, it was Chacham. It was a metamorphosis. It was amazing, absolutely amazing. I mean, he spoke and he made jokes and he knew their children and their grandchildren, and that so and so got married. I mean, he was a real rabbi. I mean, he really knew his people, and even when he was very weak, Chabad guys couldn't do that for him. He saw a member of his community. It was like when I was sitting shiva for my mother, so we were all sitting together. My dad lost, and again, it was like really moody. You don't want to sit shiva. No one should sit shiva. I'm abolishing shiva. 7 days of feasting instead. Sitting shiva is no fun. It hurts your back. It's really not good. It's whatever. And then when people talk about the departed, they're all saying the truth. Anyway, my dad was really inside. Lost his wife of over 60 years. But then when a guy came from the community, I'm telling you, it was like oxygen. It was amazing. Anyway, so when he took over the community, Shad Eitzion on Ocean Park, before that it was in Bensonhurst, Magen David, hardly anyone was a Shomer Shabbos. Hardly anyone. Yeah, because there was a big disconnect between the people that came from Damascus and Aleppo and their children. What happened was a lot of the kids also were drafted in the war. When they came back, they were really American, and they didn't relate to the grand. That's why they hired my dad, because the head of the community was a Makubal, a great Kabbalist who was from Syrian descent, who lived in Jerusalem. When he came to America to raise money, they fell in love with him. He was a sofer. He was everything. And he was actually a real Kabbalist. His name was Rabbi Yaakov Kassin of blessed memory. And he would talk to the people in Arabic, or Hebrew, but mostly Arabic. And in the 1940s, late 1940s, the people that were leading the community realized that they're going to lose it. They're going to lose the whole community. And also, you have to remember, the Sephardim, the Syrian Jews, are very fiercely independent. So they're not Ashkenazim. They're not even Sephardim. They don't get along with the Moroccans. They have to keep their traditions. That's a strength and a minus in everywhere. But I could go on for hours about the pettiness of this, but it's not important. The fact of the matter is, they're very strong on their customs. So they're very traditional in the foods and very traditional in the melodies, but they will lose. But my father was actually at that time he was a shaliach of the previous Rebbe, and he made a school in Connecticut and in Boston, Dorchester, Boston. To make a long story short, he needed a little break, so his in-laws invited him for the summer to go to Grossinger's, which was a big hotel in the Catskills. Everyone was in Grossinger's. So they had 3 different minyanim every Shabbos. They had the Sephardic minyan, they had the Ashkenazic minyan, and then they had the latecomers. But the Sephardim actually used to daven very early. So they had really like a brunch, and then they would hang out. My father, of course, davened with the Ashkenazim. And they heard him talk. He gave a Dvar Torah, and they liked what they heard. So they asked him to give a share in Pirkei Avos. So he said, sure, I'll give a share in Pirkei Avos. To make the long story short, they said, you're the guy that we need. Could you imagine?
Wow.
I should be so lucky that I would get my job in a resort. Anyone that wants to take me to Hawaii, I'm with you. I'll give a class, and I'm sure. Anyway, but that's where he met them in Grossinger's resort. And so anyway, the bottom line is, he has to feed the Rebbe. The Rebbe said you could take that job, and he became the Rabbi. But they needed someone who spoke English and someone that was hip in those days, and my dad fit that thing. So he often told me about this idea of Baal Tshuva. If he would have ever had used the word Baal Tshuva, he would have lost the whole community. Because the whole community was Baal Tshuva. The whole idea of the rabbi was to elevate them, not to make him into Baal Teshuvas. There's always that holier than thou. I am the religious one, and you are coming closer. Yeah, the whole thing is backwards. And in fact, in some bylaws, in some of the bylaws of a shul, it says, for example, the president of the shul has to be a Shomer Shabbos. And my father said, he doesn't have to be a Shomer Shabbos. He has to promise to be a Shomer Shabbos. And everyone that became a president became a Baal Tshuva. No, really, because of the prestige of being the president, they closed their store, and then they had these big Shabbos, they had kibbah, all that stuff. But you know, so he was Chabad before he even knew the Chabad story. Okay, so why am I... So anyway, how does a tzaddik become a Baal Tshuva? The answer is when he makes and he brings other people to do tshuva, but not by pointing a direction, like a one-way arrow. Because then a Baal Tshuva is someone who's with you to help you do teshuva. So if a person is insulted that I'm a Baal... It says, they say I'm a Baal Tshuva, you can respond... The Lubavitch Rebbe was a Baal Tshuva too. What? What are you talking about? He never ate the McDonald's. No, he was a Baal Teshuvah. He was a master of return. He returned every single day to God, and he brought back thousands and thousands, and it continues to grow, of many thousands of people. He was a great Baal Teshuvah. As a matter of fact, all of us that are doing Teshuvah in small little ways in our own life, we still could be a great Baal Teshuvah by having an effect on our loved ones or our neighbors or whatever it might be. So that was one chiddush of the Rebbe, that a Baal Teshuvah doesn't mean someone that sinned and returned. A Baal Teshuvah is basically a person that's in the process of returning. And if you're a tzaddik, you could be a Baal Teshuvah in addition to being a tzaddik. The second chiddush, I told you from Tavshin Chavtes, was, who was the first Baal Teshuvah? Moshe Rabbeinu. I'm changing the words a little bit, but the content is his. If you remember from last week, Hashem says to Moshe, go to Pharaoh and tell him what? Let my people go. Martin Luther, come on. I mean, let my people go.
Worship God in the desert.
Right? So, and then when he goes, right, what does Pharaoh say? Who's that guy? I don't... Make it worse. Make them work harder, right? And then suddenly everything turns bad. From bad it gets worse, and from worse it gets worser. And as he's walking outside, they say, since you came, you made us smell bad. It's terrible. Okay. What does Moshe Rabbeinu say? Hashem, why did you do this to me? You sent me to make things better. I made things worse. Okay. So he actually complained or questioned Hashem. Now there's a whole discussion about that as well, but not for now. What does Hashem answer him? He says, I appeared to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Bekel Shakai, but I never told him about the Yud, Hey, and the Vav, Hey, and now go tell Pharaoh that I'm really gonna flex my muscles. Now I'm really gonna show him. So what's gonna be taking place is much greater than what the forefathers did. Says Rashi, quoting a Midrash, Hashem says, I miss Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They never questioned. Yeah, that's what he says. I promised Abraham the whole Israel, and when his wife dies, he has to buy a parcel of land. I promised Yitzchak all of Israel, and he has to fight with the Philistines to dig a well. I promised Yaakov. I made all these promises. I never kept any one of them, and they never questioned. And you questioned? Okay. Says the Rebbe, what did Moshe Rabbeinu do after that? He took this question as a challenge and added to what he already was doing. It's not that he gave up his questioning. What's the proof? Later on, when he's on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights, the Gemara tells us an amazing thing. Moshe Rabbeinu says to God, show me the future. So he shows the Rabbi Akiva, right? I'm skipping the main story. The end of the story is, he saw Rabbi Akiva teaching. This is like a future vision. And Rabbi Akiva was so magnificent and brilliant and holy that not only was he able to explain the letters of the Torah, but somehow he said on the Aleph there's like a little tag, there's like a little crown, and on the Reish there's a different crown, and the Shin has it. He was able to give mountains of laws based on the way it was decorated in the Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu himself didn't know that, so he said to Hashem, "Wow, what's going to be his reward? This man loves you. He loves the Torah. He's so wise in the Torah. He knows more than me, and I'm being taught by you. I'll show you the reward." And he has this vision of Rabbi Akiva, like tied to a stake, and he's being tortured alive. And Moshe says, "Zu Torah, zu schayra. This is Torah. This is the reward." And what does Hashem say? Shh, shtoik, quiet. This is what I'm thinking. So the Rebbe asks a question. Moshe Rabbeinu questioned God before leaving Egypt, and what did Hashem say? Shame on you. Why are you questioning me? Avram was greater, Yitzchak was greater, Yaakov was greater. They never questioned me. And now he's on the mountain, he's doing the same thing again. Right? Yep. So the Rebbe says, what does that teach us? That teaches us not that Moshe Rabbeinu had to give up what he gives up. Moshe Rabbeinu symbolizes divine intellect. Divine intellect has to question. Chochmah ma. Moshe Rabbeinu has to ask. That's his job. But Hashem told him that in addition to what you are, there's another type of an Aveda. There's another type of a service of Hashem, which you have to think about, and that is not questioning. Not that you can't question, but you have to know when to question. You have to know how to question. You should know that Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov were very smart people. Maybe as smart, not as smart as you, but they understood, and they knew when not to ask. So what happens? Moshe was about tshuva. He basically, understand, he returned and he repented, or he absorbed that he wasn't perfect in what he was doing. There was something else that he should do. Okay, anyway, I'm bubbling. So let's just say
bubbling or babbling?
Babbling, bubbling. Okay, anyway, l'chaim everybody. It's Chav Dal Tevis. It's the Yahrtzeit of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe cares about us. He loves us. He gave us the book of the Tanya. He gave us Torah. He gave us all of the Rebbes. He gave us Chabad Chassidus. And in this holy city, there's not that many gatherings that are gathering in his honor. So I can't speak for him, but I can speak from based on my knowledge that it's well known, this story as well. The Mittler Rebbe had a chassid, and this chassid had a Mesnagdisha family. He was a chassid, but he had no. So he was once with his in the town, and it was Tes Kislev. He wanted to celebrate, but nobody wanted to celebrate. He said to his family, he said, "He's not our rabbi, so there's nothing to celebrate." He felt terrible. It's the night that celebrates the Mittler Rebbe's independence from prison, and he has no one to celebrate with. So what he did was he took a bottle, poured himself a l'chaim, and then he poured another l'chaim to the Rebbe, and he gave over a teaching, and he sang a song. He said l'chaim Rebbe, and this went on for a while. I don't know if it was in his drunken stupor, or maybe it was a dream, or maybe it was I do not know. But the story ends off by saying that the Mittler Rebbe came to him and he said, "I appreciated the Farbrengen. Thank you." Yeah, you're all alone. You're drinking in his honor, but I appreciated the Farbrengen. You know what it says. it's well known in a country where everyone is blind. If you have one eye, you're a king. You understand? So in this great holy city, not too many people tonight are saying that there was a holy tzaddik who lived and lives, and we're holding on to his climbing. We're holding on to, and we're not great chassidim, but we would like to be great chassidim, and we're bali teshuva. All of us are returning. It's very special. I can't say for sure, but from my knowledge, I know it's very special. L'chaim, may God bless each and every one of us. L'chaim, l'chaim.
Beautiful.
Pashas Va'era. Does anyone know how to spell the word Va'era? Aleph. Vav.
In Yiddish, right?
In Hebrew. Vav, Aleph, Reish, Aleph. So how many Alephs are there? Two. Rebbe writes, so this is a hint to the Alter Rebbe, who was the master of the two lights, the two luminaries of Torah. The Alter Rebbe was a luminary in the revealed part of the Torah. He wrote the Shulchan Aruch, and he also was a luminary and a light in Chassidus and in mysticism. The word light in itself, we have to Farbrengen for many days, because it's not me. In other words, Chassidus talks about light, but the idea of light doesn't only mean brightness. It actually provides direction. In other words, without light, you're lost. When the light is on, you're able to see where to go. And you could also see where not to go. So when we say that the Alter Rebbe was Shnei, his name was Shnei Or Zalman, Shnei Or, two lights, the light of Nigla, the night of Chassidus. Essentially, it's not only that he taught us Jewish law, but he showed us how to fulfill the Jewish law. How did the Alter Rebbe do that more than the Beis Yosef? Because the Alter Rebbe in the Shulchan Aruch actually gives the reasons and the explanation for the law. And we know a person is naturally inclined to follow what makes sense to him. So if I just tell you that, when you wake up in the morning, you have to wash your hands 3 times, fine, we accept it. But if there's a reason or a reasoning behind it, then washing your hands 3 times, it becomes more tasty, more geschmack, and there's more of an emphasis, more of an excitement. So the Alter Rebbe he wrote a Shulchan Aruch, which is remarkable today because it's translated in English. It's really nice. I have it in the front of highly recommended, just to buy it part of your library. To have it, there's I think 13 volumes in English of the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. So you can actually study yourself. It has the Hebrew on one side, the English on another side, then a couple of very incisive comments on the bottom. I don't know who wrote it actually at the bottom. So he's a luminary in that sense. But he's also, of course, a luminary in the sense of showing us the path of life. In one very famous comparison that the Rebbe gave in the 1980s, he compared the Alter Rebbe. I didn't learn the Maimon yet. We're going to do the Maimon in a couple minutes. He compared the Alter Rebbe to the Maimonides. One of the reasons why he compared them is because Maimonides, the great holy Rambam, his Yahrtzeit was Chof Teves, the 20th day of Tevet. The Alter Rebbe's Yahrtzeit is 3 days later, the 24th day of Tevet. So the fact that they're so closely connected in time also reminds us that there's a connection between them. Now, for the Rebbe, who's a scholar of unparalleled brilliance, he could see the connections in the way the style of writing. But even for those of us who are not anywhere near that understanding, he points out that the Rambam had many detractors in his life. Well, you say the word Rambam or Maimonides today, everyone's, one of the greatest. In his days, they burnt his books. Why? Because there were parts of Sefer Hamada, as well as mostly from Moran Nevuchim. He wrote the guide for the perplexed. They said this stuff is either blasphemy or it's too complicated, it's too Aristotelian, and they burned his books. So today it's unheard of. I mean, who could burn the Chas v'Shalom, the Rambam's works? So the same thing is when the Alter Rebbe wrote Chassidus and Tanya, he was persecuted twice. He was arrested, and even amongst his own colleagues, there was a certain amount of opposition to him. So they're similar that each one wrote a book, one of Jewish law and one for the perplexed. The Alter Rebbe, that was the Rambam, and the Alter Rebbe wrote the Shulchan Aruch and the Tanya for those that are searching for a path. Both of them had detractors in their lifetime. But here the Rebbe spent most of his emphasis. But both of them had, after the opposition, the idea of reprochmo, or I don't understand if I said it correctly, but the coming together. So one of the great Bali Musa, which we still study his works today, his name was Rabbeinu Yonah. Rabbeinu Yonah of Gronda, Gronda. I don't know if I said it rightly, but Gronda, and which is in Spain. He actually came out against the Rambam, and he went from town to town saying that you can't read his works. Ultimately, he revisited it and began to study. When he began to study, he realized that he was off completely. And then he realized that he had slandered the sage of Israel and spent the rest of his life, and he died in his travels. He went the rest of his life being a chassid, talking to everyone about the greatness of the Rambam. What do we know of Rabbeinu Yonah? Anyone know? Right? He wrote a book on tshuva. The book of tshuva from Rabbeinu Yonah was basically an expression of himself doing tshuva for what he spoke against the Rambam. The Rebbe said that actually, and the Rebbe never tired of saying it, though you have to have, like the Zohar says, woe are to the people who have ears but do not hear. The Rebbe spoke about what is called misnagid. What does a misnagid mean? Just the translation? Opposition. He says there should not be any opposition. There are no misnagdim. Why? Those that opposed Hasidus gave a reason, whether it be that they're not religious enough, or that it would make people mashuga, or that they would, they would stop doing mitzvot. They actually, if you look at the original reasons, they saw the Hasidic movement as a revolutionary movement that was trying to revolutionize Judaism and make it less observant. But it didn't take more than 50 years for them to realize that that's not true. As a matter of fact, the Rebbe would say, always with a touch of irony, that today, if you want to say someone is very religious, you say he's Hasidic. Which is the direct opposite of 150 years ago. If you wanted to say that there's a guy who's losing the tradition, you'd say, oh, he's joining the Hasidic movement. He's looking for a quick exit. He wants to drink whiskey and not daven. But today, no one says that. We still like to drink whiskey, but it's not like we don't like to daven. On the contrary, the Hasidic davening is with fervor and with longum. So the Rebbe said, if they give a reason, so once the reason is not applicable, then there's no reason for the opposition. So just like in the times of the Rambam, they said, if you read the Moreh Nevuchim, whatever it is, it's going to make people mashuga, make them follow the philosophy of Aristotle. But that never happened. So at the end, they all did tshuva and said that the greatness of the Rambam. Certainly there shouldn't be anything like that. But in any case, the Parshas Va'era is always the Parsha of Chav Daled Teves, and the Rebbe points out about the two olives symbolizes the two levels of light. So let me give you a synopsis of a mimer from the Alter Rebbe. This is the famous book, Torah Or, right, which is the Alter Rebbe's teachings. On the Chumash, it's not limited to this. He has many other books, but this is like the most famous, this and Likutei Torah. And I think if I actually paraphrase, I'm going to lose the crowd because it's late and I know you're tired because most of you work not like me. But so what I'll do is I'll not paraphrase, but I'll condense, okay? The Rebbe is going to deal with a very interesting question. And remind me, I still have to tell a story. Because, sometimes you tell a story before sleeping, sometimes you can tell a story while they're sleeping. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to calm everyone and give them a mimer. And they're in this nice reverie. Then I'll tell the story. And then when you wake up, I'll say, you missed a good story. But here's the mimer. We know that Hashem tells Aaron, tells Moshe, take your staff and go before Pharaoh, throw it on the ground. It's going to turn into a snake. Now, you all know the story. Was Pharaoh very impressed by it? No, he said, that's a trick. I could do the same trick. So all of the sorcerers throw down their staffs and it turns into a snake. But what happened was that the staff of Aaron, which means it wasn't a snake anymore, turned back into a wood. It swallowed up all of the snakes, and as Rashi points out from the Midrash, that it was scary. It was swallowing up all of these sticks, but all of the snakes, but the stick remained the stick, didn't get any bigger. Okay. The Alter Rebbe deals with this question of why is this the first of the 10 plagues? Especially when all of us know the story. It didn't do anything to Pharaoh. So clearly, making a miracle, this miracle was not to wow him. Okay, I'm going to let the Jewish people out tomorrow and everyone's going to get a gift. He doesn't do that. Hashem, of course, knew that as well. So then why start off with this idea of the staff of Aaron turning into a snake? And the second part of the question is, why is it so important that the snake turns back into a staff? And here the Alter Rebbe explains to us, why did Hashem make the 10 plagues? Now, I could open it up. We don't have to discuss it, but as just to throw it out as a question. Why did Hashem make the l'chaim?
Why? So we drink, Rabbi.
So why did Hashem give the 12 plagues? No. Why did Hashem give the 10 plagues? It certainly was not to impress the Jews. Because it says clearly in the Chumash that when Moshe Rabbeinu came and said, I have a message from God that you're going to be redeemed to the everlasting credit, what does it say in the Chumash? Vaya'amen ha'am, they believed. So Moshe Rabbeinu did not have to make any miracles so the Jewish people should believe that he's the messenger of God. That already took place with the first 3 signs that he gives over. And certainly it wasn't that he needed the miracles so they should follow him out of Egypt. They were ready to go. So why did he do it? So you would say, okay, to punish the Egyptians, which is correct, but it doesn't answer the question completely. There are many ways to punish the Egyptians, and just ask me, I'm a pretty cruel guy. I could have a long list of things that we could have done to the Egyptians. Frogs are easy. Anyway, anyone can deal with a frog in his bed and in his ear, But wait until what I think of, I mean, I'm saying those 10 plagues obviously were very powerful, but each one is instructive. So why did he give the 10 plagues? The answer is to teach the Egyptians, and through the Egyptians, the world, that there is a God. Each one of the 10 plagues revealed a truth and banged it in deeper and deeper. Because what's the first thing that Paro says when Moshe says, God told me to tell you to free his child? And he says, I never heard of him. And then the Medrash, very charmingly says he had a big book of gods. He's looking up, he's not listed. And the response is, are you going to find God in a cemetery? That's a bunch of cemetery. That's dead gods. They're not real. So the purpose of the miracles was L'man Yedu, that they should know that there is Hashem. Now, let me tell you something he's going to say later on. In Hebrew, the word das means knowledge, to know. L'man Yedu, in order they might know. But there's one place in Tanakh which is remarkable. There's a story, I'm not going to tell the whole story, but what happens is that there's a person who comes to a city and he says to the city, give me over, Mr. Yankel. And they say, no, we're not giving him to you. We're trying to protect him. And what happens is, he says, if you don't give me the guy that I'm asking for, I will teach all of you that I'm the master. And I will punish you. So you will know that I am your master. In this case, the word yedu or das doesn't mean knowledge, like 2 + 2 = 4. It means to be crushed and broken so you might come to an awareness. That's how the Alter Rebbe is going to read the story. that the reason why Hashem is going to give the 10 plagues, the first one being with the staff turning into a snake, is in order not only to teach them, but to break them, to humble them, to humiliate them, to open them up to the awareness that there is Hashem. Now the question is why? I'm sorry, I'm already jumping off. It's from the Maimah, but I'm not following the order. But why? Do you really care if a frog says, ribbit, ribbit, God is great? What does he care what the Egyptians are thinking? It's enough that he's going to take out his people. And if he wants to punish the Egyptians, he could have done it in many ways, as he did. 10 plagues, and then he makes them drown. So it's not limited to the 10 plagues. And every year we skip over this part of the Haggadah because it's boring. There actually by the sea there was 50. No, there was 200. No, there was 250. And you say, well, hold it. They already got hit 10 times. What difference does it make? Yeah. The answer is Laman Yedu means they were humbled and humbled and humbled and Avaita humbled, crushed, made to understand that there's a greater power. There's a true power, a supreme power. So why does he want the Egyptians to come to that level? The answer is it has nothing to do with the Egyptians, but it has everything to do with sparks of divinity. In our tradition, we have this mystical vision of a world primordial, before the world that was created in 6 days and rested on the 7th. Before that world, there's another world. It's called the world of Tohu, the world of randomness or chaos, and that's a world of intense spirituality, intense light. However, this light needs containers, and the containers that try to contain these lights shattered. And when we say that they shattered, what essentially happened is some of the lights were absorbed in the container that broke. For example, it's a very deep thought in Chassidus, so I'm not going to explain it. But for example, if you have a bottle of perfume, expensive perfume, okay, and then it breaks, so when you pick up the glass smells. It actually has a good fragrance. So we have the lights of holiness, of intense godliness, coming into a vessel and it's shattered. But the shattered vessels fell throughout creation. And we call that the fallen sparks. In Hebrew, we call it nitzutzim, or nitzitzis, the sparks. Where did most of these sparks fall? In Egypt. How do we know this? We actually go back, it's very interesting, we go back to the original source of creation. Are you sleeping yet? No, almost, okay. I'm getting there. We come back to the original source of creation, and we have like this. There's a place called Eden. No one has ever seen it. Even Adam and Eve, Adam and Chava, never saw Eden. Where were they? They were in the Garden of Eden. Eden, no one ever saw. That will be seen in the future, when in the days to come, in the hereafter, so to speak. So there's a river that leaves Eden, and when it leaves Eden, it goes into 4 different directions. One is Gihon, and one is Nilos, and one is Chidekel, and what's the 4th one? The Balkora. Anyway, they have 4 names. Here, in Prost, thank you very much. And Prost. It's brought down in our tradition that in a Kabbalistic vision, we would say like this: there's the first intense revelation of godliness. There's God and godliness. So the first intense revelation, which again, Gili, revelation, not it, it's not the essence, but the revelation of this trueness, of this essence, is seen in Eden, which we'll call loosely now Chachma, the wisdom or the truthfulness of God's being, in terms of using it in a form of, in a language of understanding. So Chachma, it's divine, it's a divine spark of pure truth, which is understandable in its essence. That's Eden. It flows and that's Bina. That's what we speak many times, that a river starts from a small stream somewhere, but the river broadens. So Chachma broadens into a river. But it's still very clearly associated with Eden. Nahar Yotzei Me Eden. When does it become splintered? When does it become separate? When it leaves the garden. So it's explained that Chochma of Atzilus means the world of light, which is closest to the luminary, right, to the source of light. So in the world of light, there's only oneness with God, but when it leaves that oneness through kingship, it gets divided into 4 different rivers. That's the symbol of these intense lights breaking into many different levels. Now, every river has the same definition. It starts from a spring and turns into a river, but not all rivers are equal. Some rivers, the water is drinkable. Other rivers, it's more salty. Some rivers go for thousands of miles. Some rivers much less. Where did these holy sparks flow into? Most of those sparks flowed into the Nile River, which spiritually speaking means it flowed into the prince, or the representation of Egypt. So now we have intense holiness that's covered up with concealment, and it's found in the Nile River in particular, or in Egypt. What is a covering called in Hebrew? Klippa. A covering, or a shell. So we have these intense forms of divinity which are covered up with a shell. Now, me and you are living in a klippa, in a world of shells, including our own body, because primarily we are souls in a body. What do we feel? That we're bodies that have a soul. We're just the opposite. We're really souls that use the body so the soul could express itself. Instead, it's the opposite way. We have it backwards. So we're actually in ourselves, we're our klippa. But when we look at the world around us and the Gashmias that we're surrounded by, it's all klippa. There's all divine sparks in this room, in everything that we do and everything that we wear. Because the divinity is here, God is keeping it alive, but it's all covered up with klippa, with a shell. What happens when it's covered up? What happens then is that the divine spark is not only in exile, it's alienated from its source, but something else even worse happens. The shell says, I'm primary. Could you imagine if you could talk to your orange, which don't try it, but if you spoke to your orange and the orange would say, I don't understand why you're looking for the orange. Look at the shell. You could make me into a delicious stew. You could make me candy. You say, 1 second, isn't there that soft underbelly, the more where all the nutrients are or something? No. Look at the shell. Now, an orange is not so bad because you can make orange marmalade from it. But imagine if you had the shell of a walnut, and the walnut said, "What? You're looking for the walnut? Are you nuts? Look at the shell. Look at the shell. Eat me. I have everything." You say, "No, that's very unhealthy." So what happens? Open it up. See, this is. So I want to say
That's what I'm saying.
This in particular is a very holy fruit because every pistachio shows that there's something inside of it.
Oh,
So it's a holy fruit. Yeah. So, but you understand the average klippa just covers it up. So we have a dilemma. What's the dilemma? Every holiness wants to be absorbed and reunited from its source. And it's almost like a law, as if to say, a law of nature. When you're taking from something, you want to return to its source. So we want to go home, we want to go to our parents, we want to go to our country, and so on. In spirituality, it's absolutely true. The sparks want to go back home. However, they're covered up and imprisoned by klippa. What does Hashem do? He brings the 10 plagues. What happens with the 10 plagues? It's not only an educational 10-step program that leads you to graduation, God exists. But each one of those plagues opened up more of the shell so the sparks could actually leave. And this explains that famous, beautiful teaching that when the Jewish people left Egypt, they left with all of the wealth of Egypt. They made it empty, like a fish pond. There's no fish in it. It's like a granary. It's totally empty. 200 rapach nitzutzim, right? 288 sparks. And Erev Rav, 202 of them left Egypt. So most of the holy sparks left. Why? Because of the plagues. Each plague, Leman Yedu, in order for them to know, means that they were humbled and they were crushed. Which also explains a very interesting thing. We know that what takes place by the Sea of Reeds is God makes this great miracle in order that the Egyptians should know that He exists. But here's a question. What do you mean the Egyptians should know that He exists? They all perish. Not even one remained. Even though some say one remained. But what's the answer? Mitzrayim means that there was still sparks that had to be released. So even though everyone died, Mitzrayim will know. What does Mitzrayim know? Mitzrayim means constrained or holding back. What's holding back the sparks will be humbled, so the last sparks will be elevated. Okay, now that I lost you, we'll conclude. I mean, I don't blame you because it's late and also because you don't have the text in front of you. It's not because I'm so smart. I mean, I have the text in front of me, so it reminds me, it grounds me. But I'll let go. Now we can understand better. The wicked Pharaoh is described as the most egotistical person when he said, I don't know of God. If you don't know of God, so who are you? I am God. I made myself. And he's described in the prophets, I think it's in Yechezkel, as the great crocodile. It's very hard to know exactly what it means. Hatanim Hagadol, the great snake, the great sea serpent. The great sea serpent is Pharaoh. So Hashem wanted Pharaoh, who's the epitome of unholiness. He is the spark that's covered up by tremendous clipper. Tremendous. He said, look, you see this piece of wood? This piece of wood will turn into a snake. Now 1 second. Is this wood or a snake? The answer is, it was wood, and it will turn into a snake. And what will happen when it's a snake? It will turn back to wood. What was he teaching Paro? He was teaching Paro that all of your power comes from me. All of Egypt is from me. All of the sparks, which is like a staff, is turning into a snake. That's you. You're the snake. But where is the snake getting its existence from? From the staff. In Hebrew, the word mata has, maybe you can even hear it in the modern Hebrew. Hatiya means to incline or to move. So mata Elokim means, Mr. Pharaoh, you're sitting on your throne and you're this head of this metropolitan city and you're a mega power, and you know where you're getting all of this from? From me, from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, from the Holy One, blessed be He. And Pharaoh says, really? How is that possible? I don't even know God. And Hashem says, okay, I'll show you. Here's a stick. Mata, when it gets inclined, it could turn into you. It could turn into a snake. So, am I lost? No. If you acknowledge me, it could turn back into a staff. That's why it was the first of the 10 plagues. Hashem was trying to show and demonstrate in front of Pharaoh and all of his sorcerers and all of the pinnacle of thing is that all of your power is coming from me. All of the nitzutzim, all of the holy sparks are in your palace. They're covered up with a clipper. They're covered up with a shell. But now is the time for you to crack the nut and bring out the fruit. Humble yourself. Laman yedu. Humble yourself before me. And then the holiness will come out. If me and you had to make this into a Hollywood movie, and we decided to say, you know what, why don't we do it a little bit differently? Moshe comes and says, Pharaoh, it's time to let the Jews go. He says, sure. no movie actually. and that's what it does, And for that, and then Batya comes and then hugs Moshe, and they live happily ever after. So, but I mean, could you imagine if he would have said yes? If President Putin would speak like Donald Trump, don't you think Mashiach would come? He would say like this: Hashem has set me on this land so you can make public prayer in a public school. I mean, the guy's crazy, what he's saying. It's fantastic, though. Don't start up with Israel. I mean, that's good. The klippa has to be humbled and broken, and then the nitzos becomes revealed. And that's this idea of the staff turning into a snake. Hashem is saying, your snake is from me, but you're not lost. I'm giving you the opportunity to acknowledge me so it can become back a matter. All of our whole, it's just a touch of the minor. It's in Parshas Vayera. It is very worthwhile to read it yourself and study it and meditate upon it, because it's a general concept. A general concept is we're living in a world of klippa. We're living in a world of shells. There is truth to be revealed. Why don't we want to reveal that truth? It's really based on ego. Which will be how I'm going to end with a story. But basically, the idea of we don't want to acknowledge a higher power. We don't. Why? Chas v'shalom. What? But why don't we? Because if there is a higher authority and there is a higher power, we got to listen to him. We have to listen to the Torah. So we surround ourselves by klippa, and we add more klippa and more klippa and more gashmias and more gashmias. The more physicality we have, the better it is, and the more that little holy spark cries out for a release. We hope if you use the brain, and if you study the Tanya and you do toilet training, you won't need to be humbled by God. You understand? You don't need that. But there are times when we don't get it. And then Hashem reminds us, and I'm only saying it, I don't really want, it never will happen, but Hashem reminds us sometimes of making things not go the way we want it to go. And sometimes not the way it should go. And then we realize how helpless we are. Why do we have to wait for that? It's silly to wait for that. Let's thank Hashem, be happy with Hashem, and be dedicated to Hashem. Mitoch simcha. Woo!
Rabbi, you told me to remind you to tell some story.
Oh, tell a story? Right, okay. Woo. Okay, this is a famous story. The story of the Alter Rebbe when he was still in Liyashna. There were actually 3 cities that begin with the letter Lamed, which are connected to the Alter Rebbe. There's Liadi, there's Liyashna, which when he was the Magid, and of course there is Lubavitch. Interesting enough, when the first Rebbe of Chabad became a Rebbe, he did not become a Rebbe in Lubavitch. Lubavitch became famous as the capital city of Chabad Chassidus with his son, the Mittler Rebbe, who moved there in 1814. And what happened was that after the Napoleon's War, the whole Russia was turned upside down. And basically at that time, the Mittler Rebbe was somewhere in Kremenchug, I think is the Ukraine. It's not white Russia. And what happened is that many different communities asked him to stay there and be the Rebbe. So he could have been the Rebbe of Haditch or Nezhin or whatever. But instead, he traveled to Lubavitch. And he came to Lubavitch, which is a small village actually. Even after it became the capital, it remained smallish. But he came on 18th day of Elul. It was on Chai Elul. And he said like this. He said, when my father was 10 years old, he studied with Rabbi Yisachar Ber, one of the great students of the Baal Shem Tov. And it was in Lubavitch. And he told me that I should come here. And this is where I'm going to live. Because my father told me. And so the history of Lubavitch begins actually when the Alter Rebbe is a child. And he's learning under... At that time, he didn't even know that Rabbi Yisachar Ber was a student of the Baal Shem Tov. It was kept secret. But he learned under Yisachar Ber in Lubavitch, and his son was told by his father, this is where I want you to make the capital. Of course, Lubavitch became the capital of Chabad Chassidus for 102 years, I think, and 8 months. and then it went into exile. It went to Rostov, and then with the Friedrich Rebbe, there were another 9 cities where he went from this place to that place, from this place to that. Eventually, Lubavitch rested in 770 Eastern Parkway in Brooklyn, New York. That's the 10th place where he went. Okay, but in any case, the story takes place when the Rebbe of Lubavitch was really the Maggid of Lyoshna. When the Alter Rebbe, Reb Shneur Zalman, was the rabbi and the preacher and the spiritual guide in Lyoshna. In those days, many of the Jewish people, the whole idea of Parnassa today is very different. I mean, thank God, we can't imagine how it was in 150 years ago. The poverty and people would spend a whole day working to have a piece of bread. I mean, we're not talking about vacations or cars or anything like that. I mean, it's just unbelievable how much physical toil went into bare necessities. But and especially in those days where there was the Pale of Settlement, all kinds of decrees and anti-Semitism, it's very hard for Jews to make any type of legal parnasa. One of the things which was quite common was the idea of an Airbnb. Today we call it Airbnb. In those days it meant you had a house which had an extra room or two, whatever it is, with a larger dining area, and people were always traveling, by horse and wagon, and they needed a place where the horses could rest or where they could take refreshments. And that was called, I think they called it a krechma. I'm not sure if it's Polish or Russian, but krechma means like a little what? Like a little inn. So not too far from what?
Belarusian and Polish.
What does it mean?
Like a hotel.
Like a small little inn. Anyway, so near Lyoshna there lived a Jewish woman who was Nebuchadnezzar Almana. She had lost her husband. She had 3 children, a son and 2 daughters. And she was 5 miles away from Lyoshna, whatever it was. And her parnasa, the way she was able to support herself and her children was she had this krechma, she had this inn. Her son, when he became 14 and 15, could have stayed at home, but the mother was a very pious lady. She didn't know much Torah herself, but she wanted very much that her family should be Torah involved. So she sent her son to a yeshiva. One of her daughters married a Torah scholar whose name was Velvel. The mother-in-law said to the son-in-law that really, I know you're a scholar and you need people to study with, but I can't run the inn without my daughter. I need help. So instead, what you can do is you can move into our inn. You have your own private room, whatever it is. You study most of the day. I'm not going to ask you to help out, but your wife is my daughter. She'll help. And that's what happened. So Velvel, who was actually a Torah scholar, quite proficient, took all of his books. You don't need much. You need your library, and he would study literally day and night. And of course, they were very proud of their son-in-law, the great Torah scholar. Intellectual people need intellectual stimulation. And what happens is that even if you're studying the whole day, you want to share your thoughts with someone. He was lonely. Interesting enough, there was someone else who was very similar to him, but from the opposite side of the spectrum. There was a priest who was an intellectual. He knew how to read Latin and whatever it was. And he was preaching to these dopes, He gave a sermon and whatever it is. He took confession. He had no one to talk to. So when he heard that in the krechma there's a Jewish scholar, he used to go and buy. So he gave some parnasa. And then he tried to talk. In the beginning, Velvel didn't want to talk with him. But after a while, they developed a friendship. And for the priest, it was wonderful. He had someone to talk with. But a priest remains a priest. And one of the things that a priest has to do is try to convert someone else into his religion. So after this friendship develops, he starts talking to Velvel about theological things. Velvel was quite learned. And he basically enjoyed a good debate. So it became very enjoyable. Every single, it's like you wrestle with a guy who always puts you down. Or, you do martial arts, you fight with your favorite guy. He always wins, but it's still fun. Mm-hmm. He lets you play around a little bit and they go, That's what happened. They used to have this intellectual sparring. And when the priest was finally feeling good about himself, Bevel would give one of these like, how do you explain this and that? And then your scripture says this and that. Anyway, he always won. Now Velvel had a major spiritual deficiency. And that was, to begin with, he had a tendency towards arrogance. The problem was, again, like if you're the only one that could see and everyone was blind, you might think you're the greatest until you find someone who has two eyes. And someone who could see without glasses even better. Velvel had no one to put him in his place. So in his own mind, he began thinking about how great he is. The priest, was an honest guy and enjoyed very much Velvel. And every single time Velvel won, he said, Rabbi, you're terrific. I don't know how to make guys like you. I'm going to go back and, I'm going to do my homework. Next time I'll get you. And every single time he spoke with the priest, he got more and more smug about his greatness. The almana, his mother-in-law, didn't want to interfere. It didn't seem right to her. She didn't want to interfere, but she was apprehensive. Like, I don't like this idea of him becoming so friendly with the priest. Anyway, to accelerate the story a little bit, there were other people that stopped by the Vince, many times Jewish people, and once there was a group of Jewish people seeing him talking to the priest, and they went over to him and said, this is unbecoming. You're not going to convince him. He's not going to convince you. Why are you wasting your time? And of course, he couldn't explain to them that it was enjoyable. Number one, I have someone intelligent to debate with. And number two, I always win. It's amazing. It's like you're a chess champion and you love the challenge because eventually you're going to come out winning. Anyway, the priest, from his side, when he would give a drasha, his Sunday drasha, he would often mention, by the way, our village is blessed because there's a rabbi. He's very smart, and he said nice things about the rabbi, and the people that stopped by to take a drink would often say to Velvel, our father, our reverend says we should be nice to you because you're so smart. And his ego was growing literally by leaps and bounds. Even though he was very pious with his yarmulke and his beard and he's chuckling over his Gemara, he had this idea that there's no one like me. In the meantime, the priest, they used to have what's called a village priest, but then they have like a head who's in charge of all of the villages, the parish. And there was like a bishop, a very big shot who lived in Vitebsk. And when he came to visit the priest said, I want to let you know that there's a rabbi I love him. He's the greatest guy, but he always gets the best of me. Maybe you should put him in his place. So the priest came, which was a big honor. He came with all of his entourage, and many of the goyim knew about this, and he comes in, and he takes a drink, and he gives, he pays for it. And then he sees Velvel, he says, I heard wonderful things about you. Maybe we could have a little discussion. Velvel, who's like this, I'm the greatest, sure, I could indulge you. They have this spirited debate, and he wins.
Which one? The priest?
No, the Velvel. The bishop says, wow, well, you are sharp, I kind of, think about this, whatever it is. That already was the cream on the cake. What happened was that before he left, the bishop said, I would love to get to know you better. I'd like to invite you to Vitebsk. And I'd like to spend some time with you. Obviously, I know you're Jewish, so I'm going to give you a private room. The food you'll eat yourself, but I'd love to spend 2-3 days with you, whatever. He didn't ask permission from his wife or his in-law, because he knew they would say, you sugar? Going to go travel to Vitebsk, stay in a monastery, and debate that you have nothing better to do. All we have is surahs from them. What are you going to get? But he didn't ask. He went, and he was given honor that a Jew had never received before. You understand? The bishop told all the priests, show him honor. And this guy who craved acknowledgement, this was like nectar for him. Anyway, he had many discussions with the priest. At least he thought he kept on winning. And the priest said, I've never met someone as wise as you, and you're the greatest. And when he left, if you could imagine his ego expanding, the world would have been too small for him. So he comes back, and he looks at his wife, simple lady. He looks at his mother-in-law, simpler, He looks at the dumb people around him, bunch of idiots. And he's thinking, in Vitebsk, the monastery, there are scholars, they write, they think, they debate, and they all think I'm great. So he's learning his Torah, and he's doing his mitzvahs, and he's thinking that he's God's gift to humanity, and guess what happens? A group of Talmidei Chachamim, I'm skipping a little bit of the details, a group of Talmidei Chachamim come, and as they're refreshing themselves, they get into a Torah discussion. Now, Velvel actually knew a lot of Torah, but he was nowhere near the caliber of these guys. So they're talking back and forth, and Velvel is listening, and he says, I don't understand your question, because it would seem, it's obvious from this and this place. And they look at him, they say, young man, you're still very young in Torah. You should know your place. What you said is nonsensical, and they proved him completely wrong. So learn how to show respect to his seniors. He was completely humiliated, and he had one thought in his mind: they don't appreciate me. The Goyim, they understand how great I am, but the Jews, my own brothers, and believe it or not, and this actually comes from the Rambam as well, he began to harbor a hatred towards scholars, because they don't think that he's the greatest scholar in the world. These people had no idea what Michigan was thinking. They just put him in his place. He said, look, you don't know what you're talking about, so just be quiet and listen, that's all. But he took it as, oy vey, the priest said I'm a Talmud Chacham, and you don't realize that? He spent the high holidays, and right after Sukkot, he took off. Again, he disappears. It came Hanukkah, which is like a month and a half later. He did not come back. However, he wrote a letter to his in-law saying, it's not in-law, like he's staying in Vitebsk, and he's in a monastery, and he's very happy there. Now, she was so simple, she couldn't read. So she got this letter from her son-in-law. She couldn't read it, and her daughter couldn't read it. They had to wait for her son to come. They say when the son comes home for Hanukkah, he came back from yeshiva, they said, we got a letter from, I don't know, he ran away for like 6 weeks. It must be interesting. He reads it, and he turns white. He says, Velvel wants to convert. And what? He wants to convert. And he reads the letter that he's in a monastery, and he's best friends with the bishop, and they promise him a glorious future, and he's tired of being in this provincial, backward village, surrounded by backward people thinking, and he's in his element. This was right before Shabbos, and they had there was a black Shabbos. I told you they were like outside of Liyozhna.
What does black mean?
Black means that they had no joy. Everything was falling apart. The pride of their family was that they had a son-in-law who was going to be one day a great rabbi. In the meantime, he's studying day and night. And at the end, they find out he's going to convert to Christianity. Right after Shabbos, the whole mishpacha, the wife, the mother-in-law, the second one, and the boy, and they traveled to Liyozhna. They come into Liyozhna. The Alter Rebbe was sitting with his students. It was Malav Malka. You know what Malav Malka means? The Saturday night meal. And as they're eating, and the Alter Rebbe's talking, Velvel runs in. He's like excited, together with his mother and sister, and they come in and they go, Velvel wants to convert. Everyone looks. Who's saying this? And they see this distraught family. They're hysterical. Velvel will sich schmaden. Velvel wants to convert. And they were Hasidim in front of the Rebbe. They didn't say anything. They were looking at the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, "What's happening?" So the boy, who was like the spokesman for the family, said, "Velvel, my brother-in-law, is in Vitebsk. He's in a monastery, and he wants to convert." So the Alter Rebbe, in the middle of the Malav Malka, said, "Let me tell you a story." Tells the students. He said, "I was one of the students of the Holy Maggid of Mezrich, and a similar thing happened. One day, we were sitting with our Rebbe, and a lady came in and said, my son-in-law, my son, or my husband, I don't know, he wants to convert. Rebbe, you have to save him. Now, before I go any further with the story, I want to point out, this is not conversion based on conviction. This is conversion based on pride. Where will I get more honor? I'll get more honor with the Christians being a converted Jew than I'll ever get as a Jew amongst peers. This whole thing, it was an ego trip, an arrogance trip. And this might be the background to the teaching that when a person is arrogant, it is as if he is worshiping an idol. Because when you're arrogant, you think you're in control, which is the essence of idolatry. There is no God, but there's man working through nature who makes his own destiny. That's idolatry. And that's arrogance. So basically, this Velvel is not converting because he Christianity is real. He's converting because he has an insatiable desire for honor, and the Goyim are going to give it to him. They compliment him, they honor him, they say you're the greatest, and his own Jews say, look, you're mediocre in Torah studies, so learn a little bit more. Grow up a little bit, and then we'll talk with you. So the Alter Rebbe says, in my days, we were there with the students of the Maggid, and someone came in and said, my son, I don't know, son or brother or whatever it is, wants to convert. What the Maggid of Mezrich then stopped, and he said like this, I wanted to give a Torah teaching, and the Torah teaching was based on the first parsha in Vayikra. If a man sins, he should bring a type of an offering to Hashem. So the Maggid of Mezrich gave a mystical teaching on if a man sins, and he repeated it 10 times. He then said to the students, this lady is crying about her loved one who wants to convert. I cannot do anything. But if 10 students would spend the entire night saying Tehillim, saying Psalms to protect his soul, it would be effective. So the Alter Rebbe repeated the teaching that he had heard from the Maggid and told over the story. And he said, I was one of those 10 students. It said nothing more. Of course, what did the students around the table understand? That it's up to them. So 10 students benched, went to a side room, and began to say Tillim with a lot of kavanah the entire night. Towards morning, there was no change. There were 10 Jews who were really saying Tillim on behalf of a person they'd never met, but they were saying it sincerely, that Hashem should give him some type of tshuva. And towards dawn, the widow with her son and her 2 daughters left back to go to Lyosha. And they continued speaking. And literally, when it came sunrise, a man walked in. And he was, on his face was written like, I don't know where I am. When he saw the students crying and saying Tillim, he took out a book and began to daven. The students understood that this must be Velvel. They didn't say a word. Shacharis, they davened together, and Velvel stayed for the whole Hanukkah in Liyashna. Now, the Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad, did not teach Torah every day. But that entire week that this stranger was there, every night he gave a Torah teaching. At the end of Hanukkah, this Velvel boy, the students never said a word to him about his background. They just allowed him. You know what I mean? They welcomed him, but did not embrace him. You were there, but he wasn't. They didn't ask any details because they knew already that he was the. At the end of Hanukkah, he went into the Alter Rebbe for Yechidus. He left a changed person, and he went back to Lyoshna, and they moved. The whole family moved from Lyoshna, and eventually became one of the students of the Alter Rebbe. This idea, that's the end of the story. Like, what are the lessons? I'll let you think about the lessons. But you understand? But like just like we see a happy Hanukkah 3 months later and it's in front of our eyes, there's something that's in front of your eyes over here, and that is this idea of kavod, this illusionary feeling of being respected, being honored, being acknowledged, is so dangerous. It could actually bring a person to idolatry. What this Chassidus does, Torah it is a Torah of light. It shows us who we are, but what we can be. That's in the Hayom Yom. Chassidus shows you the negative, but it doesn't stop with that. Because to say you're a garnish, you are a nothing, would crush us. If I'm a nothing, what am I even trying? No. You're a nothing where you are, but you could become so much greater. Yes, and that's Torah. It provides a direction. There's light. You have to change your diaper. But you could one day actually walk around, perfumed. You won't be as cute as a kid, but you'll be handsome, it'll be a different story. The bottom line is you can do it. It's Chavdal Teves, it's the Alter Rebbe's Yahrtzeit. We owe him such a thanks, for opening up our eyes. Torah. L'chaim, l'chaim, everybody. May we all be illuminated. L'chaim. Okay, one more nigga before we do the evening service. Am Yisrael have no fear, Mashiach will be in this year. Yisrael have no fear, Mashiach will be in this year. We want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we don't want to wait. We want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we don't want to wait. Am Yisrael have no fear, Mashiach will be in this year. Am Yisrael, Mashiach will be in this year. We want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we don't want to wait. We want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we don't want to wait. Am Yisrael, have no fear, Mashiach will be in this year. Have no fear, Mashiach will be in this year. We want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach. We don't want to wait. We want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach.